carried the dog for 6 miles. On foot. In August. Not because he had to, but because nobody else would have cared like he did. That was the day his son saw the truth and could not unsee it. Part 1. The Lawn Whisperer. Frank Delaney never looked much from the road. Just a man in a faded green shirt with sweat on his back, pushing a mower across one yard, then the next. In the summer, the Carolina heat painted salt lines on his hat brim. By fall, he worked in layers, pruning shrubs with worn gloves and knees that clicked when he bent. Nobody saw his name stitched on the shirt pocket anymore. It had frayed off years ago. He was 68. Hadn't he retired because there was nothing to retire to? Frank lived in a plain one-story home on Maple Ridge Drive in Sanford, North Carolina. The siding was chipped, the porch had a tilt, but the lawn was always perfect, not flashy, just cared for, like someone had taken their time, like it mattered. His son was 15. All arms, headphones, and judgment. He called Frank's job manual labor, the way a banker might say, rats in the alley. Frank did not fight it. Didn't he push back? He just worked. He had done the same for 40 years, ever since Cole's mother died when Cole was barely 2. He would raise the boy on paychecks from mowing lawns, planting azaleas, cleaning gutters, never late on bills, never missed a dentist appointment, even had a basic life insurance plan, term life, $40 a month, never touched it. Carl did not see it as providing, he saw it as surviving. Frank kept to his rote. His old truck rattled down the same roads he had been cutting for years. Seniors who could not tend their yards anymore, young couples who never had the time, and a few who just liked how he trimmed edges like a whisper barely there. Clean. Like the lawn had grown that way all on its own. People called him the Lawn Whisperer once, as a joke. It stuck. But lately, Frank had been forgetting things. Small things. Where he left the hand rake. Whether he would already fertilized Miss Logan's back row. Whether Cole had come home or not. It scared him more than he let on. There was a photo in the living room. Frank in use. Navy uniform. 1977. He kept it near the TV, though no one ever asked about it. He did not miss the service. Just the clarity. You had a mission. You did it. You were not questioned every day for not having a degree or a LinkedIn. At night, he sat with Rex. Rex was a lab mix with joints as stiff as Frank's. 12 years old, mostly blind in one eye. Still limped from the time a copperhead bit his paw when he was 6, loyal beyond logic, slept under Frank's chair and followed him from porch to truck every morning. Cole liked Rex, but not the way Frank did. One Thursday morning, while edging a ditch behind a law office, Rex got spooked by the roar of a leaf blower. He darted into the road. The impact was not loud, but it was final. A blue-seated, brake too late. The bumper caught Rex square in the hind leg and sent him tumbling into a ditch. The driver slowed, looked, then kept going. Frank screamed. He was on his knees in the ditch before the dust settled. Rex whimpered once. Blood soaked through the dog's back leg and spread into the dry dirt like ink from a cracked pen. Frank looked up. He was miles from home. His phone was dead. No one nearby. He tried waving to cars 3 past. He slipped his arms under Rex's chest and hoisted him up. The dog was nearly 50 pounds, but Frank carried him. Heat, through pain, through 6 blistering miles of pavement and sidewalks. He did not stop. By the time he reached the vet's office, his shirt was soaked through, his arms trembled, his chest ached so badly he nearly collapsed on the counter. They rushed Rex in. Frank sat down on the floor. Couldn't he feel his legs? Just stared at his hands, at the blood, at the dust. He whispered, "You are all I have got." 2 hours later, they told him Rex would make it. A clean break. Surgery. Weeks of care. Expensive. Frank nodded. Do it? They asked how he would pay. He hesitated. He would already dipped into his savings for new brakes on the truck last month. But he had the policy, that term life insurance. It had cash-out options if you were still alive. Early withdrawal. Penalties. Yes, but still something. He did not care, whatever it took. That night, he slept on the floor beside Rex's kennel. The next day, Cole showed up at the clinic. Not because he wanted to, but because the neighbors started texting him. And the first thing he saw was not the dog. It was Frank, collapsed on a plastic chair, one arm cradling Rex's cone-covered head, the other resting on a vet bill folded neatly in thirds. Cole looked around. Holloway from down the street had left flowers. A teenager from 2 blocks over taped a drawing to the window. Frank mowing lawns with wings. The old man who never waved a little thank you note. You kept me alive that winter. I wanted to end things. And beside the donation jar was a card. For Frank. He mows hope into the dirt. Carl did not speak. He just sat next to his father. Rex stirred, licked Frank's hand. Then, in the stillness of antiseptic air and low beeping machines, Cole whispered something Frank would never forget. Dad. I did not know. Frank did not lift his head. He just said, now you do. Part 2, the weight of dirt. Cole did not remember the ride home. The pickup cab smelled like warm dog fur and dried grass. The kind of scent that clung to his dad's shirts, no matter how many times they went through the wash. Rex was in the back seat, still groggy from the anesthesia, wrapped in a sling and silence. Frank drove with both hands on the wheel. Eyes ahead. Posture stiff, like something might fall apart if he loosened even a little. Cole opened his mouth twice, but no words came out. He was not good at this, at saying real things. They pulled into the driveway. The house looked the same except it did not. The bushes out front were trimmed like topiaries. Perfectly rounded. The mailbox flag had been repainted. Even the tiny walkway cracks had been filled with pebbles. It was quiet. Too quiet. Rex whimpered once when Frank lifted him gently from the truck bed and carried him to the porch. Cole followed behind with the cone collar and the medications the vet tech had listed out like a legal contract: painkillers, antibiotics, follow-up x-rays. Frank laid Rex down on a folded comforter in the shaded corner of the porch. The old dog settled slowly, the way old men ease into church pews, bones protesting every inch. Cole sat down on the top step. Frank did not say much, just stroked Rex's fur and whispered things Cole could not hear. Something had shifted, not just between them, but inside Cole. All night, he would replay what the vet had said. Your dad carried him 6 miles uphill in August. I have never seen anything like that. And the donation jar, the notes, the drawing. Frank had never said he knew that man down the street was suicidal. Had never told Cole he trimmed that front yard for free during the man's slowest months. He did not need to tell. He just did it. There was no resume, no press, just blades of grass and one life at a time. Cole turned. How much was the bill? Frank did not look up. Enough? You're gonna be okay. I have seen worse. Silence again. Cole rubbed the back of his neck. I can help. I can take a shift. Maybe evenings at the diner. Frank raised an eyebrow. The one you said smelled like fryer oil and broken dreams. Cole chuckled. Sheepishly. Still does. They sat in the dusk, porch light flickering. Frank finally said, I cashed out the policy. What? The insurance. He nodded. Had some value left. Not much, but enough to get Rex the surgery. Cole frowned. But what about? I mean, is not that for? In case something happens to you. Frank looked at him. Something did happen. He is part of the family. That hit harder than Cole expected. Frank leaned back against the wood post. Exhaling slowly. You ever think maybe some of us were not meant to build towers or close deals? Some of us just keep things tidy. Give people back a little order in a world that has got too damn much chaos. Cole swallowed. He would never thought of it like that. To him, landscaping was what his dad settled for, not a calling. But yesterday, he saw what that quiet labor meant to people. The way Castor's wife hugged Frank like he would pulled her husband from a river. The way the boy down the road teared up when he gave Rex a crumpled tennis ball. Frank was not just cutting grass. He was stitching people back together. The next morning, Cole got up early, found his dad already out back with a rake and a bucket of mulch. Thought I would help, Cole said, grabbing the extra rake from the shed. Frank did not say anything, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward. They worked in silence, just like they used to, when Cole was small and loved holding the hose like a firefighter, spraying puddles until he was soaked and happy. That night, after Frank fell asleep in his chair beside Rex, Cole sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. He typed lawn care insurance into Google, then affordable small business coverage North Carolina. Clicked through a few links, jotted down notes, not because his dad had asked, but because something inside him needed to understand what Frank had built and how to protect it. He kept going. Medicare supplemental plans, joint pain treatment options, even grants for aging workers. His dad had never asked for help, but maybe it was time someone offered. The next day, they went on the first job together. Holloway, S. Frank had hesitated, but Cole insisted. I will do the bending. You do the whispering. They trimmed hedges, pulled weeds, and reseeded the patch beneath the mailbox. Cole worked clumsily at first, shovel upside down. Lines crooked, but Frank did not say a word, just offered a slight nod when the blade finally hit straight. Holloway came out in her robe and handed them lemonade. She looked at Cole. "Your dad. He has saved more than this yard. You know." Cole blinked. "Yeah. I am starting to get that." When they got home, Rex wagged his tail from his comforter. Frank sat down beside him and whispered, "They think I saved them, but truth is, this dog saved me." Cole stood in the doorway. He saw the truth now, clear as a mowed lawn at sunrise. Sometimes the world does not celebrate the quiet ones. The back pain sufferers, the insurance payers, the men who show up when no one is looking, who give more than they ever get back. But those men change everything, 1 yard at a time, 1 sun at a time. Part 3: What the Grass Remembers. The following Monday, Cole found himself staring at his father's hands. They were cracked and calloused, thick-knuckled and scarred. One finger was permanently bent at the joint. Frank never talked about it, but Cole remembered the time it got caught in a chain trimmer 10 years ago. No insurance then, just duct tape, rubbing alcohol, and 2 days off work. Frank was teaching him how to start the string trimmer, priming bulb first, then hold the choke. 2 pulls. No more. If it does not go, check the line. Don't yank it angry. Cole nodded, biting his tongue. They were at the Williams place on Pine Hollow Lane. Older couple. The husband had Parkinson's. Frank always pulled weeds from the back patio for free. Said it was just good form. Cole had never known. To him, they would always been another house in another row of houses. Until today, they worked side by side in the heat, the kind that made sweat pool behind your ears. Cole's hands blistered fast. Frank did not say, "I told you so," just handed him gloves and pointed toward the shade. By lunch, they would finish the front and were setting up for mulch. Frank moved slower than he used to. Cole noticed the way his dad leaned a little too long after standing up, the way he massaged his lower back when he thought Cole was not looking. "Dad," Cole said, as they loaded the last of the mulch bags into the wheelbarrow, "you ever think about hiring help?" Frank wiped his brow. "I have had help before. No one stuck." "Why not?" Frank looked at him. They did not care. Cole thought about that all afternoon. When they got home, Rex was napping on the porch, wrapped in a soft blanket. His cone was scratched, his stitches pink and tender, but his tail still thumped when they arrived. Frank knelt beside him. "That is a good boy." Cole sat next to him. "Can I ask you something?" Frank nodded without looking up. "Why did not you ever tell me how much people depended on you?" Frank chuckled. "Would you have believed me? I do not know." Cole admitted. Frank leaned back. "People do not see lawn guys. They see the result, not the hands doing the work." He looked at his palms, as if remembering every splinter and scrape. "You know," Frank added, "I planned once, before your mom passed." Cole turned. "Like what?" Frank took a long breath. "Wanted to start a real nursery. Trees, plants, landscape design. Even looked at a property out near Morrisville." "What happened?" "Life. Your mom's cancer came fast. Insurance only covered so much. Savings went with her. After that, I just needed something solid. something that paid quick. Lawn care did. Cole felt the words sink in. He would never heard this before. His dad had dreams, had plans, and they would been traded not for failure, but for family. You still could, you know, Cole said. That dream. We could look at grants, small business stuff, even part-time. Frank smiled faintly. Am I? Maybe because of your age. People respect legacy, Dad. You have built one. Frank did not answer, just reached over and gently scratched Rex's ear. That night, Cole could not sleep. He got up and wandered into the shed out back. The place smelled of gasoline, pine mulch, and wet soil, shelves lined with hand tools. Some rusted, some sharpened to precision. A wall calendar from 2012 still hung above the workbench. He found a thick folder tucked into an old cooler. Delaney Lawn and Garden. Inside were receipts, old invoices, a notebook with sketches, garden layouts, hedge plans, notes like rocks around the maple, Mrs. Ellis likes curved lines. At the bottom was a faded photo of Frank and a woman with curly brown hair, standing under a sapling. His mom. Behind them, a sign on the truck, coming soon, Delaney Landscaping and Nursery. Cole stared at it for a long time. By morning, he had a plan. He started Googling local business grants for seniors. Read articles about small business liability insurance, startup deductions, even veteran loan options. All the stuff he would once dismissed as dad work. It was survival and maybe even redemption. When Frank came into the kitchen at 6:30, coffee already in hand, Cole pushed a paper across the table. What is this? A business plan? Cole said, heart pounding. For Delaney Nursery. I stayed up late. There is a senior small business loan you qualify for. And if we list Rex as a therapy animal, we can actually deduct part of his medical expenses under certain conditions. I checked. Frank blinked. You are serious? Cole nodded. I know you think you are too old, but people respect legacy businesses now. People want roots. They trust someone who is still showing up, even after a hard life. Frank looked away. I am not good with numbers or websites. I am, Cole said quietly, and I do not want you doing it alone. Frank did not respond right away. Then he stood, walked out to the porch, looked at Rex, at the sun rising over the yard he would cut 100 times, at the rows of dirt he would rake clean for decades. Finally, he turned back. All right, he said. Let us plant something new. Part 4, the things we water. They started small. Just 2 raised beds behind the house, right where the crabgrass used to overrun the fence. Cole laid the wood frame. Frank filled it with compost and topsoil from a friend's farm in Bear Creek. Together, they planted rosemary, lavender, and marigolds, plants that would not die if they forgot to water them for a day. It was not much, but it was something that belonged to both of them. The neighbors noticed first. Holloway walked by and called over the fence. You selling cuttings yet? Frank just smiled and waved, but later that night, he jotted it down in a notebook. Soft stem starts for neighbors. Ask about hollow root pots. Cole saw it, and his chest warmed. They were not calling it a business yet. Not officially, but they set up a folding table at the Sanford Sunday market with 3 flats of potted herbs, a hand-drawn sign that said Delaney Roots, and Rex asleep in a shaded corner, cone collar finally gone. Frank wore his old work shirt, the green one, with the faded patch. Cole brought a clipboard and a cash box. They sold out in 2 hours. People did not just buy basil, they talked. They told Frank how they remembered him clearing snow off their steps without asking, how he always waved to their kids, how he still edged lawns straight even if nobody would notice. They talked about their knees, their insurance woes, their retirement fears. Frank listened. He always had. And when they left, they smiled not because they would bought a plant, but because someone had made them feel seen. That night, Cole stood by the sink washing clay off his hands. "You ever think it would come back to you like this?" he asked. Frank sat at the table, rubbing liniment on his shoulder. Didn't expect anything to come back at all. Cole paused. "I mean it, Dad. You built something people remember." Frank looked up, and I almost left it behind. He meant the insurance policy, the one he would cashed out for Rex. They never spoke about the money again, but Cole noticed the quiet changes. Frank stopped ordering takeout, cancelled the cable, started comparing generic meds at the pharmacy. He was cutting corners so the dream would not die a second time. Cole would not let that happen, so he kept researching. One night, after Rex had curled up beneath the table and the crickets had started their slow summer chorus, Cole pulled out a brochure. "I called the county extension office," he said. "They run a grant for veteran-owned agricultural startups. You would qualify. We just have to file the IN, write a letter of intent, and get basic liability coverage." Frank blinked. "Slow down, Professor." Cole laughed. "Sorry, I got excited." Frank turned the brochure in his hands. "All that government stuff makes me nervous. I will help. We will do it together." Frank nodded slowly. "You sure this ain't just a phase? You will be off to college soon." Cole looked at him and said something he had not before. "I turned down that scholarship." Frank's brow creased. "What?" "Because it was not right for me," Cole said. "And I want to build something real, with my hands. Like you." Frank looked down, said nothing, until he reached across the table and gripped Cole's hand hard. They sat there for a long while, man and boy, father and son, the silence loud with things neither had said when they should have. 2 weeks later, they got their first landscaping order for a full backyard redesign. It came from a woman named Denise, who ran a hospice home near the outskirts of town. "We just want the garden to feel peaceful," she said. "For the families. Something soft, calming." Frank nodded. "Lavender, low benches, maybe a fountain." Denise smiled. "That is why I called you." He blinked. "Why is that?" She hesitated, then said, "My husband passed 2 years ago. I watched you every week out front, mowing the neighbor's lawn. I did not know you, but something about the way you worked made me feel like the world was not falling apart." Frank did not reply, just touched the brim of his cap. That night, they drove home in silence. Frank finally spoke. You think people can really feel that? The way something's been trimmed? Or the slope of the earth? Cole looked at him. I think people feel love, even when it is quiet. Rex took a turn that same week. He was not eating much. His back leg, the one shattered in the accident, had stiffened despite therapy. The vet called it degenerative. Nothing to fix, just to manage. Frank sat beside him on the porch that night, the same comforter folded neatly beneath the old dog's body. You done good, he whispered. You brought my son back. Cole watched from the screen door. He did not interrupt. By late August, the backyard nursery had a nameplate, 2 benches, and a chalkboard list of today's smells featuring mint, lemon balm, and frankincense. People came just to breathe. Some stayed to talk. Some left with seedlings. One man left a check for $500 with a note. For the vet bill, for all the quiet kindness. Cole folded it and slipped it into a new envelope marked Hope Fund. He never told his dad. He did not need to, because this time they were building something together. Not a business, not just a garden, but a life that remembered what mattered and watered it daily. Part 5. When the dog stopped barking. It was the smell that told Frank something was wrong. He would always trusted scent more than sight. How the soil shifted after rain. How lavender bloomed sweet then bitter. How an old dog's breath changed when something inside was starting to shut down. On a Sunday morning in early September, Frank stepped onto the porch with his usual coffee and found Rex still sleeping. Too still. His ribs were not moving right. His breathing was shallow, almost soundless. His tail, usually thumping when Frank approached, lay limp on the worn quilt. "Buddy," Frank said softly. No response. He crouched down, knees crackling, and touched the dog's ear. It was cool. Not cold. Not gone. But wrong. He did not call out. He just knelt beside Rex and waited. Cole found him there 20 minutes later. Coffee untouched. Hand resting gently on Rex's side like a man trying to memorize the feel of someone fading. "What is wrong?" Cole asked, voice already cracking. Frank did not answer. Cole crouched beside him, and for the first time in years, saw something like fear in his father's eyes. "He is tired," Frank said, barely above a whisper. "I think he is. I think it is time." They took Rex to the vet. The same young woman who Dee helped with the surgery greeted them gently, her eyes soft as her voice. "He is in pain," she said. "There are options, but the kindest might be letting go." Frank did not nod. Didn't he cry? He just looked at Cole. "You stay," he said. "I need a minute." Frank walked the perimeter of the parking lot, slow and stiff, as the wind rustled through the dry trees. It smelled like mulch and memory. In his mind, Rex was still a pup, rescued from a litter behind a tire shop. Cole had been 5 then, scared of thunder and climbing ropes, and Rex had followed him from room to room like a shadow with fur. There, deep in a Christmas, when Rex had eaten an entire tray of sugar cookies and vomited under the tree, A summer when he would limp for weeks after chasing a squirrel into the storm drain. And 1,000 mornings when Frank found him curled by the back door, ready to go no matter how old his bones got. Frank leaned against the truck, letting the ache swell in his chest. He would buried comrades, his wife, his parents. But this was different, because Rex had seen it all. The worst of him, the small humiliations, the unpaid bills, the winter he thought about selling the mower for groceries, the spring he could not afford to fix the heater, and they all wore coats to bed. And Rex never judged him, just stayed. When Frank returned inside, Rex was already resting on a thick blanket, eyes barely open. Cole was sitting beside him, both hands gently wrapped around one of Rex's paws. Frank knelt down. The vet gave them time, and when it was over, when Rex's chest stopped its weak rhythm and his tail stilled, Frank laid his forehead against the dog's side. He did not speak. Didn't he need to? The silence said everything. The backyard felt hollow without him. The garden still grew wild and unruly, the rosemary standing tall like stubborn elders, but something in the air had changed. The porch creaked a little more. The mornings seemed too quiet. Frank did not talk much that week. He still raked, still watered, but slower. Cole started taking over the bookkeeping, calling suppliers, even trimming the back hedges. Customers still came, but the man they remembered, the one with the soft touch and quiet advice, was different now. Dulled by grief. One evening, as golden light spilled across the beds, Cole walked out with a shoebox under his arm. "What is that?" Frank asked. Cole sat beside him and opened it. Inside were scraps, photos, collars, receipts, old vet records, a chewed-up tennis ball. "I found it in the garage," Cole said. "Thought we could build something." Frank lifted the ball. Still smelled faintly like dirt and dog. They stayed there, sifting through the past, like men panning for gold in a river of memory. At the bottom of the box was a note, written in a child's handwriting. "I love Ref. He makes me brave. I hope he lives forever. College." Frank blinked hard. Then, slowly, he stood. "We should bury him," he said. Cole nodded. They chose a patch near the back fence, under the dogwood tree. Frank dug the hole himself, his movements slow but deliberate. They placed Rex in gently, wrapped in the same comforter he would slept on since the accident. Frank planted marigolds on top, something to keep the bugs off. He murmured. They made a marker from a stone and carved a single word into it. Loyal. That night, Frank sat on the porch with an old ledger in his lap. He opened it, page after page of client names, job notes, dates. But on the back cover, he would scrawled something years ago. A goal. Start again. Small nursery. Just enough. Something lasting. Cole saw it over his shoulder. You already started, he said. Frank nodded. But it is not done yet. The next morning, Cole had news. I submitted the application for the veteran grant. Frank raised an eyebrow. And we made it to the interview round. If we get it, it is enough for a new greenhouse. Maybe a proper sign, some solar panels. Frank exhaled. What is the catch? Cole smiled. You got to talk about yourself. And Rex. And why you never stopped showing up. Frank looked at the garden, at the dogwood tree. Then he smiled, for the first time in days. Maybe I am finally ready. A week later, the interview took place under a tent at the county fairgrounds. Frank wore his cleanest shirt. Cole handled the paperwork. They sat across from a panel of three, a retired farmer, a woman from the Department of Agriculture, and a young man with a laptop and big city shoes. They asked questions. Frank answered simply. Why now? Because dreams do not die. They just wait. What makes your business special? I know what it means to feel forgotten, so I grow things that make people remember. And Rex? Frank's voice broke. He was what held the pieces together, even when I could not. There was a silence then, and the old farmer nodded. I think that is worth planting. 2 months later, they broke ground on the greenhouse. Neighbors came to help. One brought shovels, another brought chili and cornbread. Denise from the hospice came with a check and a card. Frank stood in the center of the yard as the frame went up, sunlight bouncing off the metal beams. Cole leaned beside him. We should name it. Frank nodded. They looked toward the back fence, where the marigolds bloomed bright under the tree. How about the Rex house? Cole said. Frank smiled. That'll do. Part 6. The Rex house opens. The day they opened the Rex house, the air smelled like fresh mulch, sun-warmed basil, and hope. It was early October, a Saturday that started crisp and bloomed into warmth by noon. Frank stood under the archway Cole had built from reclaimed fence posts and chicken wire, watching neighbors filter in one by one, curiosity and kindness mingling in their expressions. There was no ribbon cutting, no music, no mayor, just a handwritten chalkboard leaning against a flour barrel. Welcome to the Rex house, where things grow slow and stay long. Cole had added a drawing of a dog paw in the bottom corner. Frank had seen it that morning and turned away fast. But now, seeing people smile as they read it, he felt something loosen in his chest. Not release, not yet, but the start of it. Inside the greenhouse, the tables were lined with seedlings and herbs. Thyme, oregano, lavender, mint, a few early pansies, hanging baskets with ivy, just enough bloom to promise something more. It was not perfect. A few of the pots were cracked, and Frank had not finished painting the side wall, but it was alive, and it was theirs. The first person through the arch was Myrrh, Caster, leaning on a cane. I ain't bought a plant in 20 years. He grumbled, but I will be damned if I do not leave with one today. Frank shook his hand. Cole helped him pick out a planter of rosemary and tucked a handwritten note into the bag. Care, a little sun, a little water, and someone to talk to it now and then. The second person was Denise from the hospice center. She did not say much, just hugged Frank a little too tightly and gave Cole a folded card. Inside was a gift certificate to the local print shop. Get yourself a sign. It read, something Rex would be proud to stand beneath. By mid-afternoon, a little boy tugged his mom toward the dogwood tree in the back. Is this where the dog lives? He asked. Frank bent down. "It is where he rests. Buddy," he said gently, "but he is still here. Every time something blooms, that is him saying hi." The boy nodded solemnly, then ran off to sniff every flower. When the last visitor left, Cole sat on the bench beneath the dogwood, notebook in hand. 23 sales, he said, and 38 visits. That is incredible. Frank nodded slowly. It is a start. Cole flipped a page. We still have room for the second propagation table. I called that seed rep you like Jillian. Right? She is sending samples. Frank tilted his head. And how much did that cost us? Nothing, Cole said with a smile. Turns out grief is good marketing. She said Rex's story reminded her of her old dog. Said she would sponsor a whole row. Frank leaned back, letting the late light stretch across his boots. This place, he said after a long pause, it ain't just for selling plants, is it? Cole shook his head. It is for healing. That night, Frank could not sleep. He lay awake, thinking of the greenhouse filled with strangers, hands and warm soil, of Rex's soft breathing on cold mornings, of the years he would lived like his life had already happened, like the best parts were behind him. He rose before dawn, put on the green shirt with the frayed pocket, and walked barefoot to the greenhouse. Inside, the plants were still sleeping, their leaves curled slightly, their stems leaning toward the promise of morning. He stood in the quiet hum of the space, listening to the creak of beams and the hush of air. And then he whispered, "We did it, buddy." Over the next few weeks, the Rex house became more than a plant shop. It became a place. A woman came every Wednesday to sit under the dogwood and sketch. A retired schoolteacher brought her grantor every Saturday to learn the names of herbs. One afternoon, a couple who had just buried their old Labrador came and left with a tray of forget-me-nots. Frank never asked questions. He just handed them a note. Some things do not end. They just bloom differently. Cole started keeping a corkboard on the wall. People pinned up pictures of their pets, notes to loved ones, prayers. One card read, "Thank you for reminding me that kindness grows, even after loss." Frank did not say much about it, but every time he walked past the board, he stood a little straighter. Then came the envelope, unmarked, delivered by hand from the Grant Foundation. Cole opened it at the kitchen table while Frank folded laundry beside him. "We got it," Cole softly, "the full award." Frank stopped. "Enough for a delivery trailer. Proper irrigation, some heaters for winter propagation, and a stipend for one of us to work part-time." Frank sat down, slowly. "A stipend?" Cole grinned. "It is not retirement, but it means you can take a breath." Frank looked away. "You should take it." Cole blinked. "Dad, I am not going to be around forever." Frank said, voice steady but soft, "And you have got something here. You have got people listening to you, trusting you." Cole set the envelope down. "And none of that happens without you." Frank met his eyes, and for once, he did not deflect. Later that week, Cole found him in the shed, sanding down an old piece of cedar. "Thought we could use this for a new sign." Frank said, "But it needs carving." Cole tilted his head. What do you want it to say? Frank ran his fingers over the wood grain, then said, grown with quiet hands, watered by love. Fall deepened. The Rex house held a harvest event with cider and leaf bundles. A dog rescue group set up next to the herbs, and every puppy wore a little ribbon that said Rex's Legacy. Frank watched from the porch. He saw a world that had once passed him by, now pausing to listen. He saw Cole moving with confidence, explaining perennials, teaching a boy how to dig without hurting the roots. And in that moment, he knew it had not been just about lawns, or survival, or the next job. It had always been about belonging, about building something in silence that spoke louder than words. That night, after the last crate was packed, Frank and Cole sat on the steps in the dark. A soft breeze moved through the trees. The porch light flickered. "You proud of me?" Cole asked suddenly. Frank turned, surprised. "I am proud with you," he said. "That is different and deeper." Cole swallowed hard. They sat a while longer. Then Cole leaned over and asked, "You think Rex would be like the greenhouse?" Frank smiled without hesitation. "He would be loved the mud." Part 7. The Stranger at the Fence. The first frost came early that year. Frank noticed it in the basil first, how the edges curled in, bruised by cold. Despite the canvas tarp, he would stretched over the bed. He stood there in his heavy coat, breath fogging the air, watching the plants surrender without noise or resistance. "That is the thing about the soft ones," he murmured. "They feel the weather first." Cole came out with 2 mugs of instant cocoa. He handed one over and nodded at the basil. "We will replant in spring." Frank took the mug, fingers stiff around the warmth. "If we make it to spring?" Cole gave him a look. Frank shrugged. "The heater's rattling again. We will need to look into propane. I already called the installer." Cole said, "He is coming Friday." Covered by the grant, Frank gave a short nod. Not because he doubted Cole, he did not anymore, but because part of him still could not believe someone else was carrying the weight. The two of them walked to the porch and sat in their usual spots. Rex's blanket was still folded beneath the bench. Neither of them had touched it. They sipped cocoa in silence until a car slowed at the curb. An old Bic, rust around the edges, North Carolina plates. A woman stepped out, gray hair pulled into a tight bun, long coat, the kind with deep pockets. In her hands, a small box wrapped in brown paper and twine. She stood at the gate for a moment before opening it and walking slowly up the path. Frank stood. "Can I help you?" She smiled. "Are you Frank Delaney?" "I am Nora," she said. "Nora Gaines. My father was Walter Gaines. He passed away last summer." Frank blinked. Walter Gaines. That name. It took a second to pull it from the filing cabinet of memory, but it was there. A narrow-faced man who lived on the edge of town. Reclusive, liked his hedges trimmed just so, had a dog named Lincoln who barked at everyone but Rex. Frank had cut his lawn every month for nearly a decade. Nora stepped forward and held out the box. "I found this in his closet. It is addressed to you." Frank took the box. Slowly. "I did not know he had any kids." We were estranged, she said simply. He could be difficult. Frank gave a small, sad smile. That is one way to put it. She paused. He did not talk about many people near the end. But he mentioned you. Said the lawn man with the dog was the only person who showed up every time, even when he did not ask. Frank looked down at the box. It is heavy. He used to sit at the window. Nora added. Said you were the only part of the week that felt normal. Frank nodded slowly. Thank you, he said. Nora gave him a soft smile and turned to leave. Before she reached the gate, she added, he left the house to a shelter, but the lawn they are asking if they can keep using your design. The same layout. Frank blinked. Sure, if it helps someone. When she drove off, Cole came over and stared at the package. You can open it. Frank sat on the porch step and carefully untied the twine. Inside, there was a thick envelope and something wrapped in cloth. He opened the envelope first. A letter written in trembling pen. Frank, you probably do not remember, but in 2011, I had a bad winter. I was days away from taking the pills. You showed up, middle of a snowstorm, and cleared my walkway. Said nothing. Just worked. Then left a box of canned soup at the door. That was the first time someone had done something for me without asking for anything in return. I did not take the pills. I shoveled myself back up the next day. You saved my life. This is my father's watch. He wore it through the depression, then passed it to me. Now I pass it to you. Thank you for saving a man no one saw. Frank unwrapped the cloth. Inside was an old wristwatch, leather band cracked, face yellowed with time. It did not tick anymore, but it did not need to. Cole knelt beside him. Dead. Frank did not speak. He just turned the watch over. On the back, one word was etched. Steady. They mounted the watch in a glass box and placed it inside the Rex house, next to the corkboard where customers pinned their pet photos and goodbye notes. Beneath it, Cole wrote a small card. For the unseen things that keep us steady. The customers noticed, and stories started pouring in. One man left a note that said, your dog reminded me of the one I lost in 2003. I never buried him properly. I did today. A woman cried while holding a pot of rosemary, telling Frank it smelled like her mother's kitchen, and that she had not remembered her mom's voice in years, until then. They did not come for plants anymore. They came to feel something, and they did. That winter, Frank started sleeping later. Cole took over the early watering. Frank stayed inside longer, resting joints that did not bend like they used to. He did not complain, but Cole noticed how slowly he walked when the frost lingered. How long it took him to get up from his chair. One morning in December, Frank handed Cole a folder. What is this? Business docs. Grant receipts. Backups of the nursery plan. Insurance forms. Ownership papers. Cole opened the folder, frowning. Why are you giving me this? Because you are ready. Frank said, I'm not. You are. I just kept thinking this place would fall apart without me. But it did not. It grew. He paused, I can rest now?" Cole looked at his father, at the deep lines in his face, carved not just by age, but by labor, by love, by loss. And for the first time, he realized what Frank had carried all those years was not just lawns, or tools, or pain. It was people, one life at a time. And now, Cole was carrying him. On Christmas Eve, they held a candlelight gathering under the dogwood. 30 people came. Someone played an old hymn on guitar. The rescue group brought 3 puppies, all wearing little scarves that said, "Ask me about Rex." Frank sat in a lawn chair wrapped in a quilt. Cole brought him hot cider. The greenhouse twinkled with borrowed string lights, the warmth inside glowing like a second sun. At the end of the night, Cole stood up and cleared his throat. "I used to think what my dad did was not important," he said. "People grew quiet. I thought cutting grass and trimming hedges was just work. I thought he should be done more, been more. But now I know." He glanced at Frank, who looked back with tired, grateful eyes. He was always doing more than I ever knew. He showed up when no one else did. That is what makes a legacy. Not how loud you live, but how long people remember you after you have gone. No one clapped. They just stood in silence, letting it settle deep in their bones. And then someone whispered, "Amen." Later that night, when the last candle flickered and Frank was tucked into bed, Cole stepped onto the porch. The stars were out. The wind had stilled. Somewhere in the greenhouse, something bloomed quietly, unseen, and near the dogwood, a small breeze rustled the marigolds. Cole smiled. "Good night, Rex," he whispered, then turned off the porch light. Part 8, Winter Roots. The new year came in quietly. No fireworks, no loud countdown, just the creak of cold wind against the shutters and the hum of the space heater in Frank's bedroom. Outside, a thin layer of frost turned the backyard into glass, each stem and blade glittering with morning light. Frank stayed in bed later than usual. He still rose before 7. Some habits would not leave even if the body wanted them to, but it took longer now. His knees groaned. His hip clicked when he swung it over the edge. He moved like the porch stairs in April, still strong, but not quite safe to lean on too hard. Cole noticed. He pretended not to at first, still handing over mugs of tea, still making jokes about old man strength when Frank tried to lift a mulch bag. But now he paused when Frank stood too quickly. He hovered when his father bent over, and Frank let him. That was the biggest shift of all. One morning, Frank sat by the window watching a squirrel try to bury something in the frozen garden bed. Cole walked in holding 2 envelopes. "Mail came," he said, holding one up. "This one is from the foundation." Frank raised an eyebrow. "They want you to come speak," Cole said, unfolding the letter. "April, in Raleigh. Legacy and leadership in rural business. They want you to talk about the Rex house." Frank scoffed. "Talk? In a suit?" Cole grinned. "I already said yes." Frank gave him a long look, then cracked a smile. "You better be buying the gas." The second envelope was from the county. Cole opened it while Frank took a sip of tea. He frowned. "What is it?" Frank asked. Cole hesitated. It is a tax. Frank blinked. Higher than usual. Cole nodded. It is the business property rate. They reassessed the greenhouse now that it is producing income. Plus, your social security adjustments kicked in this month, and Frank waved a hand. Speak English. Cole sighed. It means it is more than we thought. About double. Frank set his mug down slowly. That is gonna hurt. I know. Cole said. But we will figure it out. Maybe scale back a few things. Frank did not respond right away. His eyes drifted to the window again. You know, he said quietly, I never thought I would live long enough to owe taxes on something I chose to build. Cole looked up. Frank smiled faintly. Kinda feels good. They made a plan. Cole met with a local accountant, one of Miss Holloway's grandsons, who helped them restructure the nursery under a limited liability company. They applied for a small agriculture tax credit. They re-evaluated their insurance. Frank's coverage was outdated, and Cole insisted they look into supplemental options. It is not about you, Cole said when Frank resisted. It is about the people who depend on you. Frank raised an eyebrow. That a speech from the grant letter? Cole shook his head. That is from me. The Rex house stayed open through the coldest months. They offered hot tea. Thursday's visitors came to sit by the heater, sip peppermint tea, and talk about their dogs, their grandkids, their losses. Frank mostly listened. He did not say much these days, but when he did, people leaned in. I lost my husband last fall, one woman said, fingers trembling on the mug. Frank looked at her and said gently, loss is just love without a place to go. That is why it aches. She cried then, and thanked him before she left. In February, they got a postcard from a woman in Ohio. It read, I saw your story in a gardening magazine. My husband used to mow for our whole street. He passed away last year. I thought I would lost him completely until I read about yours. Thank you for reminding me what kindness looks like. There was a check inside. $50. She had written, please plant something in his name. They did. A small cedar. Right at the edge of the yard. Cole made a wooden marker that said, for John who kept the grass short and the hearts full. Frank did not say a word when he saw it. But later that evening, he stood by the tree alone for a long time. Frank's health had its good days and bad. He started keeping a notebook by his bed. Not to journal, he said, that was too sentimental, but to jot down plant pairings, seasonal notes, and quotes he overheard. Cole found one page that read, quiet things grow deep, like roots, like boys into men. He closed the book without comment. Then came the call from the vet. A new dog had been brought in, found wandering along the train tracks, limping and cold. A black and white mutt, skinny, with half an ear missing. The vet thought of Frank immediately. She said she could not explain it, told his dad. But the dog would not stop sitting near the bench outside, the one with the paw print plaque. Like he was waiting, Frank put down his tools. They drove to the clinic, and there he was curled in the corner, eyes too old for his size, ribs showing, tail still wagging with the cautious hope of an animal who had seen too much and trusted anyway. Frank knelt down slowly. The dog did not move, just stared, then, gently, leaned his head against Frank's palm. Cole whispered, "Looks like Rex sent someone. They named him Ash. Because of the color, because of what grows after fire. Ash never barked much. He had a limp that never quite went away, and a habit of curling his body around Frank's boots while he sat on the porch. But he was there, and Frank seemed to stand a little straighter again. In March, the greenhouse overflowed. The warmth returned, and with it came rows of new life sunflowers, tomatoes, peonies. The corkboard was so full they started a second one. People kept bringing photos, stories, gratitude. One woman pinned a picture of her and her sister, hugging a pot of lavender. Beneath it, a note. We had not spoken in 5 years, but she came to the Rex house with me, and we remembered how to laugh. Frank saw it, read it twice, then said softly, "That is the thing about plants. They do not just grow. They repair." That night, as Cole closed the greenhouse doors, Frank stood by the bench beneath the dogwood. Ash sat beside him. "You think it is enough?" Frank asked. "All this?" Cole did not answer right away. Then he said, "You carried this whole thing on your back for decades. Through pain, bills, loneliness. I think the world is just now catching up to what you have been planting all along." Frank nodded, and for the first time, he did not feel the weight, just the peace of something growing in all the right places. Part 9. The note in the shirt pocket. The day Frank did not come out by sunrise, Cole knew something had changed. It was not like his father to stay in bed past dawn, not even during the worst of the winter months. Not even when his knees flared up or when Rex passed. Frank had always been the heartbeat of the morning, that quiet shuffle, the clink of the coffee spoon, the creak of the back door opening to inspect the frost. But today, silence. Cole knocked gently on the bedroom door. "Dad." No answer. He stepped inside. Frank was awake barely, propped up against the pillows, quilt pulled up to his chest, his hands resting in his lap like they were waiting for something. Called softly, kneeling beside the bed, "How are you feeling?" Frank looked over. His eyes were clear, but tired in a way Cole had not seen before, like a porch swing after a storm. He whispered. Cole smiled gently. "Still hanging in there?" Frank chuckled once, then coughed. "That I am?" Cole helped him sit up, brought over warm tea, turned on the small space heater. Ash padded into the room and laid his chin across Frank's feet, without a sound. "I had a dream," Frank said after a few sips. "Yeah. I was mowing again, but the grass just kept growing, taller than me, taller than the house. But it did not feel scary, just peaceful, like it did not matter if I finished." Cole swallowed. "You do not have to finish everything, Dad." Frank looked over. "I know. That is why I got you." Over the next few days, Frank moved less and slept more. Cole called the local nurse, who Dee helped when Rex was healing. She came by twice a day, checked vitals, adjusted pillows. She never used words like hospice, but Cole knew Frank had outlasted more than most his wife, his parents, his old crew buddies. He would carried grief and dignity like twin weights, and now his body was simply letting go. One evening, Cole found himself sorting the laundry, something Frank usually insisted on doing. There was an old work shirt at the bottom of the hamper, the green one, with the faded pocket. The one Frank had worn for years until the stitching gave up. Cole almost tossed it in the donation pile, but something made him pause. Inside the breast pocket was a folded note. Old paper, soft at the edges, folded tight like something hidden, not forgotten, but tucked away. Cole opened it. To whoever finds this, if I am gone, it means the Mauer's finally quiet. But if you are reading this, it also means something grew. I know I was not perfect. I raised a son while learning to be a man at the same time. I did not have all the answers. I only had 2 hands and a dog who listened better than most people ever did. But if this nursery survived, if it ever mattered to someone, then maybe I did okay. Maybe trimming the edges was enough. Tell Cole he did it, even if he thinks he did not. Tell him I saw everything, every late night, every good choice, every seed planted with love. Tell him I am proud of the man he became. And if he ever wonders if he should keep going, tell him the answer is yes. Always yes. Frank Delaney, The Lawn Whisperer. Cole read it twice. Then he sat on the floor and cried in the quiet. The old work shirt balled in his hands like a memory that still smelled of grass and love. Frank passed 3 days later. He was in bed, ash cold at his feet, a breeze carrying the scent of dogwood through the cracked window. Cole was there, holding his hand. No last words, just a soft breath that never returned. But Cole did not need words. The man had already said everything that mattered with his hands, with his work, with that one hidden note. The funeral was small, just like Frank would be wanted. They buried him behind the Rex house, beside Rex and the cedar tree from Moyo. Cole built the box himself, sturdy cedar planks, sealed with beeswax and soil from their first raised bed. He placed the faded green work shirt on top. The whole town came, not for spectacle, but because he had come for them. Holloway read a short poem about growing things in silence. Denise from the hospice left a rosemary plant at the grave. A man Cole did not recognize approached quietly, hat in hand. He used to mow my father's lawn in '94. He said, for free. Never said why. Just showed up. Guess I know now. Cole nodded, unable to speak. In the days after, people sent cards, photos, even clippings from the gardens Frank had helped shape. One child mailed a crayon drawing labeled Myrrh. Frank's garden heaven, with Rex jumping in clouds of daisies. The Rex house did not close. Cole thought about it, but then remembered the note. Always yes. So he stayed. And so did the people. More came now. Some who had never met Frank, but had heard about the greenhouse, about the dog, about the man who carried more than grass clippings on his back. Cole started a small plaque near the front. In memory of Frank Delaney, he cut grass, but grew people. One afternoon in April, Cole stood behind the podium at the Rayleigh event. He wore a simple suit, carried the watch Walter Gaines had left Frank in his pocket. He looked out at the crowd, mostly older men and women, some in flannel, some in suits, all of them carrying their own quiet burdens. And he told them the story of a father of a dog, of lawns and legacies. He did not speak like a polished businessman. He spoke like a son who had watched a man live fully, even in silence. I used to think what he did not matter, Cole said, but now I know he gave people back their mornings, their dignity, their hope, one blade of grass at a time. When he finished, no one applauded right away. They just stood together in stillness, and that meant more than any ovation. Later that spring, Cole was kneeling in the greenhouse when a boy walked in holding a clay pot. "You sell soil?" he asked. "Sure do," Cole said. "How much you need?" The boy shrugged. "Enough to plant something for my dad." Cole paused. "Tell me about him," he said, and the boy did, and Cole listened, because he had learned like his father that sometimes the best way to honor someone was to make space for what they left behind to keep growing. Outside, the cedar trees swayed gently. Ash slept beneath the bench, and from the back of the garden, a few marigolds opened, bright and brave, their petals catching the wind like flags that refused to lower. Part 10. The last seed. Spring unfolded like a breath held too long. The Rex house bloomed fuller than it ever had, rows of snapdragons and columbines stretching toward the sun, and customers arriving not just to buy, but to remember. A retired teacher came each week to water a planter she called George, named after her late husband. A young couple left a note with ultrasound photos. "Plant something pink. She is coming in September." Cole kept it all going. Each morning, he swept the front walk, brewed 2 mugs of tea, still setting one on the bench for Frank out of habit. Ash followed him everywhere, the quiet shadow to a man who now walked in his father's shoes. Literally and figuratively, Frank's old boots, polished and resoled, fit Cole perfectly now. He would replace the green work shirt with his own version, dark grey, with a stitched patch that read, "Delaney and Son." Below it, smaller letters, "Where roots remember." One warm Thursday afternoon, Cole was reorganizing the shed when he came across a dented metal tin. It was the old seed box. Frank used to carry it around during the early nursery days, rattling like a maraca with loose packets and scribbled labels. Cole popped the lid open, expecting old basil or sunflower seeds. But there was only one thing inside, a small paper envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with a single piece of brittle tape. On the front, written in a familiar hand, "For one last try." Inside, a single seed, round, dark, unremarkable, and a folded note. "If you find this, it means I did not get the chance, but you did, so plant it." No questions. Just plant. It is not for money, not for fame. It is just a promise. Something good will come of it, even if it is small. Dad. Cole held it in his palm, stunned at how something so tiny could suddenly feel so heavy. No instructions. No name. Just trust. He chose a spot behind the greenhouse. Not under the dogwood, not where Rex and Frank were buried. This was something else. A new chapter, not a closing line. He dug the hole by hand, even though the shovel sat ready nearby, laid the seed in like a prayer, covered it with soft soil, watered it with care, and whispered, "Whatever you are, wherever you are going, We are ready. Days passed. Then weeks. Customers came and went. Ash turned a year older. The cedar tree from Io thickened at the base. And still, Cole checked that patch of dirt each morning. Nothing. No sprout. No stem. He stopped mentioning it, told himself maybe it had been a joke, something his dad had slipped in for sentiment. Or maybe had just been too old, too dry. Not every seed makes it. That is nature, that is life. And yet every day, he still watered it. In June, after a particularly hot stretch, Cole was prepping early for the Saturday market when Denise from the hospice arrived holding a tray of Tia roses. "They are from our residence," she said, smiling. "You've been the only place that smells like home." She stopped short as they walked past the back corner of the greenhouse. She said softly, pointing, "Is that?" He turned and froze. There, in the dirt, was a shoot. Just one. Thin. Awkward. Reaching like a green whisper in a world of noise. He knelt beside it, leaves still curled, barely out of the ground. But alive. He did not recognize the plant. Didn't he need to? Because it was not about what it would become. It was about who believed it could. By July, the plant had grown a foot tall. Visitors asked about it. Cole simply called it Frank's last try. Some laughed. Some wept. One woman drove from Asheville just to sit beside it for an hour. "Lost my dad last year," she told Cole. "He left me a notebook filled with jokes. But this is different. This is still growing." Cole smiled. "So are you." Later that summer, a boy named Ellie started volunteering at the Rex house. 11 years old. Foster kid, quick with his hands, quiet with his eyes. Cole let him water the herbs and name the roses. One afternoon, while helping bag mulch, Ellie looked up and asked, "Delaney, do you think plants remember who planted them?" Cole knelt down beside him. "I think they remember the feeling," he said. "How careful you were, how much you hoped." Ellie nodded. Then whispered, "I hope someone remembers me like that someday." Cole reached into the soil and handed him a trowel. "Start here," he said. "Every root's a memory waiting to grow." In late August, the mystery plant bloomed. One flower, wide, pale violet, fragrant, not sweet, but clean, like rain on cedar. No one knew the name. No one could find it in a book. But it did not matter. They called it Delaney's bloom. And people came from towns over just to see it, to sit beside it, to believe again in the quiet kind of legacy, the kind that does not shout or shine, but rises anyway. Through frost, through grief, through time. That fall, Cole stood at the edge of the yard as the leaves began to turn. Ash was older now, slower, but still loyal. He lay beside the bench, chin on his paws, tail thumping softly when Cole approached. In his hand, Cole held a weathered envelope, the last of Frank's handwriting. Addressed simply, "For when the season changes." Inside, another short note. If you are reading this, it means you stayed. You did not have to, but you did. And for what it is worth, I think that makes you the bravest kind of man. Keep planting. Keep listening. Keep loving the world, even when it is quiet. Because I promise you, the world is still listening back. Love always, Dad. Cole folded the letter and placed it beneath the cedar tree, tucking it under the soil. Then he walked back to the greenhouse, opened the door, and smiled, because somewhere inside, beneath rows of basil and thyme, a new child laughed at the scent of mint. Because someone was planting again, because Frank Delaney, the lawn whisperer, had not passed. He had simply taken root. And oh, how he would groan. The end.